People say love fades slowly, like old paint peeling from a wooden wall. But on Maple Street in Vermont, love did not fade for Daniel and Claire Harper. It only went quiet. They had been married for 26 years. Their house was white with blue shutters, the kind of home that looks peaceful from the outside. Daniel was 52, a high school history teacher with calm eyes and steady habits. Claire was 50, once bright and playful, now softer, quieter, careful with her emotions. They had raised 2 children who were now grown and living in different states. The house that used to echo with noise and music now held long stretches of silence. Their days moved like clockwork. Daniel left for work at 7:30. Claire cleaned, painted sometimes, cooked dinner. They spoke kindly to each other. They never fought loudly. They were respectful, responsible, and distant. At night, they sat on opposite ends of the couch watching television. Sometimes their shoulders touched, but neither of them leaned in. They went to bed at the same time but slept facing different directions. It was not anger between them, it was absence. One October evening, the air turned cold enough to frost the edges of the windows. Claire stood in the living room holding a warm cup of tea. She was not thinking about anything special, just watching the quiet street. That was when she noticed movement in the house across from theirs. A moving truck had come earlier that week, but she had not paid much attention. Now the lights were on. Inside the opposite house, a young couple moved around their kitchen. They were laughing. The woman, tall with long brown hair, jumped into the arms of the man as he walked in. He spun her once before setting her down. Their energy filled the room even from a distance. They did not close their curtains. Claire felt something stir in her chest. It was not jealousy. It was memory. Daniel walked into the room and saw her standing at the window. He followed her gaze and noticed the couple dancing in their kitchen. New neighbors. He said quietly. Claire nodded but did not look away. They watched the young couple move around each other easily. The man kissed the woman's forehead while she stirred something on the stove. She leaned into him without thinking. It was natural, light, warm. Do you miss that? Daniel asked after a moment. His voice was calm, but there was something fragile in it. Claire hesitated. She could have said no. She could have laughed it off. But the truth had been sitting in her heart for years. Yes, she said softly. The word hung between them. Daniel did not respond right away. He stepped closer to the window. For the first time in a long while, they stood shoulder to shoulder. Without tension, they watched the young couple dance again, music faintly visible through the way their bodies swayed. That night, when they went to bed, Claire lay awake longer than usual. She remembered when she used to wait for Daniel to come. Home from work, she would check the clock and smile before he even walked through the door. She remembered how he used to lift her off the ground in their tiny first apartment in Boston. They had once danced in a kitchen much smaller than the one across the street. Somewhere along the way, they had stopped dancing the next evening. Almost without planning it, Claire found herself at the window again around the same time. The young couple, Lethan and Madison, she later learned, were in their living room. This time they were sitting close on the couch, talking, laughing. Heads bent together, Don Yo joined her again. They don't even close the blinds, he said lightly. Maybe they don't care who sees, Claire replied. She did not mean for the sentence to sound heavy, but it did. Daniel looked at her carefully. For years, they had avoided certain conversations. They spoke about bills, about the kids, about schedules. They did not speak about longing. They did not speak about touch. Maybe, he said slowly, they just don't think about it. Claire turned from the window and looked at her husband fully. The lines around his eyes were deeper now. His hair had more gray than brown. But he was still the man who once wrote her letters during summer break because he missed her too much. I think we used to be like that, she said. Daniel gave a small smile. We were worse. We annoyed the neighbors. Claire laughed quietly, and the sound surprised both of them. It had been a long time since laughter came easily between them. Over the next few days, the window became something like a quiet ritual. Around dinner time, one or both of them would drift toward it. Sometimes they would speak, sometimes they would not. They watched the young couple cook together, tease each other, hold hands, argue lightly, and then laugh again. It was not about spying. It was about remembering how it felt to be wanted. One Friday night, rain tapped gently against the glass. Across the street, Ethan pulled Madison close and kissed her forehead. She wrapped her arms around him tightly, as if she never wanted to let go. Claire swallowed. "Do you think they'll always be like that?" she asked. "No," Daniel answered honestly. "Life changes things." Claire nodded. It changed. Daniel did not argue. Instead, he turned toward her. He saw something in her eyes he had not seen in years. Vulnerability? What if it doesn't have to stay changed? He asked quietly. The question felt risky. Hope always does, Claire. Looked at him, really looked at him. She saw the man who held her hand during her father's funeral. The man who stayed up all night when their daughter had a fever. The man who once painted the bedroom walls yellow because she said it felt like sunlight. Without fully planning it, she stepped closer. Their bodies were not used to sudden closeness anymore. For a second, it felt almost awkward. Then Daniel gently reached up and touched her cheek. The movement was slow, careful, like he was asking permission. Claire closed her eyes at the warmth of his hand. Across the street, the young couple laughed. Again, unaware that their open curtains had become a mirror. Daniel leaned his forehead against Claire's. "I miss you," he said, voice low. "I'm right here," she whispered. But they both knew what he meant. Suddenly, Claire felt bold in a way she had not felt in years. She took his hand and placed it around her waist. Not dramatically, naturally. Daniel inhaled sharply. He had forgotten how small and strong she felt in his arms. And that was when it happened. Madison glanced toward their house. Her eyes stopped. She nudged Ethan and pointed gently. Both of them looked straight at Daniel and Claire. Time slowed. Daniel felt heat rush to his face. Claire's heart pounded in her chest. They had been watching quietly for days, thinking they were invisible, but they were not. For a second, Claire expected embarrassment to flood her. She expected Daniel to step back quickly. He did not. Instead, he tightened his arm around her slightly. Across the street, Madison did not look angry. She did not look upset. She simply looked curious, almost thoughtful. Ethan whispered something to her, and she smiled faintly. Claire realized something strange in that moment. They were not being judged. They were being seen. An understanding passed between the two houses. No one waved, no one gestured. But the air felt different now. After a long moment, Ethan reached over and gently closed one side of their curtain, but left the other half open. It was not a full goodbye. To the view, it was something in between. Daniel and Claire slowly stepped away from their window. Neither spoke for a few seconds. "Well?" Daniel said softly, a hint of humor in his voice. "I guess we're not as subtle as we thought." Claire laughed again, but this time there was color in her cheeks. "That wasn't subtle at all," she admitted. They stood in the middle of their living room, unsure what to do next. The television was off. The rain continued outside. The house felt less empty than usual. Daniel looked at her with a question in his eyes. Claire answered it without words. She reached for his hand first. It was a small movement, but it felt powerful. Across the street, behind half-closed curtains, the young couple continued their evening, but inside the White House with blue shutters, something had already begun to wake up. The first night they knew they were being watched. Daniel did not close the curtains, neither did Claire. They stood in the living room longer than usual, the lights warm around them. The air filled with a quiet tension that felt new and electric. Across Maple Street, Ethan and Madison moved more slowly than before. Their glances toward the Harper house were no longer accidents. They were aware. Everyone was aware. The next evening, Claire came downstairs wearing a soft blue dress she had not worn in years. It flowed gently around her knees and made her feel younger than she expected. She brushed her hair carefully and added a little lipstick. She told herself it was just for dinner at home. But she knew it was more than that. Daniel noticed the moment he walked in from work. He paused in the doorway, briefcase still in hand. For a second, he looked like the man she married at 24, slightly nervous and completely in love. "You look beautiful," he said without hesitation. Claire felt warmth rise to her cheeks. "It's just an old dress." "It's not." "The dress," he replied. That small exchange changed the energy in the room. They ate dinner at the table instead of in front of the television. They talked about simple things, but their eyes met more often. After the dishes were done, music played softly from Daniel's phone. It was an old song they used to dance to in their first apartment. Claire looked toward the window. The curtains were open. Across the street, lights were on. She turned back. To Daniel, "Let's not waste this," she said quietly. He understood. He stepped closer and offered his hand. She placed hers in it without fear. They began to move slowly, not perfectly, not like experts, but like two people remembering a language they once spoke fluently. His hand rested at her waist. Her head leaned against his chest. They swayed gently in the middle of the living room. Outside. Nothing dramatic happened. Cars passed. Leaves moved in the wind. But inside that house, something long asleep stretched and breathed. Claire felt Daniel's heart beating steadily under her cheek. She realized how much she had missed this simple closeness. No children interrupting, no work emails waiting. Just them. Across the street, Ethan stood near his own window. Madison joined him. They did not hide their curiosity now. They watched the older couple dance with a kind of quiet respect. It was not playful anymore. It was thoughtful. Daniel noticed them, but did not pull away. Instead, he held Claire a little closer. He whispered, "Let them see what years looks like." Claire smiled against his chest. For the first time, being seen did not feel embarrassing. It felt powerful. Over the next few days, a silent pattern formed between the two houses. Around the same time each evening, lights would glow in both living rooms. Curtains remained open, movements slowed. Small gestures became visible, hands brushing, heads leaning close, soft laughter carried in body language. Daniel shaved more, carefully before dinner. Claire started wearing colors again, instead of gray and beige. She painted her nails one afternoon, something she had stopped doing years ago. When Daniel noticed, he lifted her hand and kissed her knuckles playfully. She laughed like she used to. The watching changed them, but not in a reckless way. It made them aware of effort. It reminded them that love was not automatic. It required movement, attention, choice. One evening, Claire lit candles in the living room, the soft glow reflected in the window. Daniel brought out an old photo album from their closet. They sat on the floor together, flipping through pictures of their wedding day, vacations, the children as toddlers covered in cake. "Look at us," Claire said softly, touching a photo of them dancing barefoot at a beach in Maine. Daniel studied the image. "We were fearless. We were younger," she corrected gently. He shook his head. "No, we were braver." The words settled between them. Across the street, Ethan and Madison were also sitting close that night, but their faces were serious. They were talking deeply, hands linked. It was clear that young love was not always simple either, Claire noticed. "They're learning too," she said. Daniel followed her gaze. "Maybe we all are." The air between the houses no longer felt strange. It felt shared. Then something unexpected happened. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, there was a knock on the Harpers' front door. Claire opened it to find Madison standing there holding a small apple pie in both hands. Ethan stood just behind her, looking polite and slightly nervous. "Hi," Madison said with a shy smile. "We realize we never properly introduced ourselves. We're Ethan and Madison." Claire's lips curved slowly. "I'm Claire. This is Daniel." They invited them in. The conversation began lightly jobs. How long they had lived there, where they were from. Ethan worked in tech. Madison was finishing graduate school in psychology. They were engaged, but not yet married. At first, no one mentioned the windows, but tension hovered gently in the room like an unspoken secret. Finally, Ethan cleared his throat. "We hope this doesn't sound strange." He began carefully. "But we've noticed, sometimes we all keep our curtains open." Daniel raised an eyebrow, amused. Madison quickly added, "It's not a complaint, it's just, we see you. Too a lot." Claire held her breath for a second, and she asked softly. Madison looked at Daniel and Claire with honest eyes. "It's comforting." That answer surprised them. Ethan nodded. "We argue sometimes. We're still figuring things out. But when we see you two standing close or dancing or just being calm together, it makes us think long-term as possible." Silence filled the room, but it was warm, not awkward. Claire felt something deep inside her shift. All this time, she thought they were the ones watching youth, trying to borrow its energy. She had not realized that youth was watching them too, searching for proof that love could survive time. Daniel leaned back in his chair. "We're not perfect," he said honestly. "There were years we barely spoke about anything that mattered." Madison listened carefully, but you came back to each other. Claire glanced at Daniel. "We're still coming back." The four of them shared pie and stories for over 2 hours. They talked about fear of growing apart, about routine, about how easy it is to stop trying when life feels busy. The conversation felt real and open. Like something rare. When Ethan and Madison finally stood to leave, Madison paused at the door. "Thank you," she said sincerely, "for not closing the curtains." After they left, Daniel closed the door. Gently. He and Claire stood in the quiet hallway for a moment. "Well," Daniel said softly, "I didn't expect that." Claire leaned against the wall thinking, "Neither did I." They walked back into the living room together. The sun was setting, casting orange light through the open window. Across the street, Ethan and Madison were visible again, moving around. Their kitchen. Daniel walked toward the curtains slowly. Claire tilted her head, closing them. He looked back at her with a small smile. Maybe he stepped closer instead of pulling the fabric. He reached for her hand. "We don't need an audience anymore," he said gently. "We know what we have." Claire studied his face, the lines, the gray hair, the familiar eyes that had seen every version of her. "You're right," she said. But neither of them rushed to shut the world out. Instead, they moved toward each other. No performance, no awareness of being observed, just instinct. Daniel wrapped his arms around her. Claire rested her hands on his chest. Their kiss was slow, steady, full of years lived together. Held apology and forgiveness, memory and promise, across the street. Ethan and Madison stood at their own window. Madison reached for the curtain softly. This time, closed it fully. Back in the White House with blue shutters, Daniel finally pulled their curtains together as well. The room grew softer, more private. Not ignored of shame, but protected. Out of choice, Claire smiled gently. Full circle. Daniel nodded. Full commitment. They sat together on the couch, closer than they had in years. The silence between them no longer felt empty. It felt peaceful. Outside, Maple Street remained quiet. 2 houses faced each other, both holding love at different stages. One young and learning, one older and remembering. And inside the Harper home after years of distance. Daniel and Claire did not feel like watchers anymore. They felt seen. They felt chosen. And this time, they chose each other back.